So we've got our book here again by M.Rohr, I think it might be, R-O-H-R. This is my book, but there's probably something very similar to it in the library. And I found another one that I'm going to do, and it's this one here, which is, it says sleeve with slash gathers at shoulder. So I've done it here, and so this is what it looks like once it's done. And I'm actually a little bit out of whack here. That the shoulder should be in the center of that strip there, but you can see that there's like darts coming out from the armhole and then gathers in here. So it's really cute. It's a really like, I'd say it was a real sort of 1940s look, because you could imagine this has no shoulder pad in here, no shoulder pad allowance, but you could imagine, you know, if this was boosted with a shoulder pad and maybe this was a little bit fuller, because this is the first time I've done this. But you know, there could be some interfacing in there and a bit of puff as well to, you know, like to make it even more dramatic. But it's a very otherwise, you know, like it also be quite sweet if it was just, you know, like in a chiffon or a jersey or something like that as well, so to give a real softness to it. So what they say to do to start off with, so we've traced out our block, so just our regular block here, traced it out, and so I've drawn these lines. So from the shoulder here we've come out 0.5 or 1 centimeter full scale, down 2 centimeters, that's 4 centimeters full scale, and made a rectangle. So here to here will be 2 centimeters full scale, 4 centimeters full scale this way. And then these points here, from about halfway onto each, halfway down to, I did this by eye based on their illustration. So this is probably like, you know, about halfway between our sleeve head and our underarm line, and then another one coming down to the underarm, and the same on the other side. So one down to the underarm and one halfway between these 2 points, and then down to the about, you know, like halfway between this depth here to find the center point. So once you've drawn those lines, then you need to cut this out and you need to separate the pieces. So you end up with this section here, and what have we got here? You can see that there.
Like a jigsaw.
It's like a jigsaw, yes. So that's with the pieces cut apart. And then they say for you to move this up, so this goes up here. Oh, actually I need to separate that. So this comes up, and you move it up as long as it is. So that's 4 centimeters. So it's moved up 4 centimeters up to there. And then we open these up. So between this point here and this point here is that's another 4 centimeters.
So that's full scale?
Full scale,
two
yeah.
on half scale,
So 2 on half scale, 4 on full scale. And to get, this might be a bit weird, like going from here and knowing, you know, where to measure. But the thing that you do is you sort of get from, you know, measure from this point here, from that corner, and you know, if you just measure up and then put a line, you know, you probably can't see that, but put a line across, and then once you swing it from the underarm, it's where that end point there meets the little line that you've just drawn. And it can be a bit fiddly because we're working with real, like, you know, really sharp points down here. It can get a bit tricky, but you'll know, you know, like once you've got it into position and you've drawn it, you'll know whether you've done the right thing or not. And the thing is too that this length here stays the same, it doesn't change, and that's why it touches at each of these points. So again, we're changing the shape of this, but we're not changing the length. And then again from this point out here, another 2 centimeters, and then the same on the other side.
So it's really just opening it up evenly.
Yeah, exactly.
All those slash lines.
Yeah. And the good thing about it too is that when it comes back together, because this length here hasn't changed and this length here hasn't changed, you know, it's actually not really much harder to sew it back into the armhole, because there's no gathers into the armhole. The gathers just go back onto this little piece here.
Yeah.
So once we've got those into position, you trace around those, and then this is where we end up. So I've traced around these sections just as a copy of this, moved this section up, so it was here, and I moved it up to there, moved it up to there. And then what we need to do is, from this point here, we just need to draw a line directly to this point here. So that's from here directly to there, and the same on the other side, so from here to that one there. And try and make sure that this angle ends up being a right angle. Like don't swing it around so this ends up as a sort of a funny point here. Try and keep it at a right angle, because when you gather that in and sew it onto this, you'll get a better flow through. So this length here stays the same on both sides, and then this length from here to here, if we put a gather, that actually gathers up. And you can see here, so it gathers up and it joins onto that line there. And it's interesting because usually, you know, that would just be a dart, and those two seams would be the same length, and they just sew flat onto each other. But in this instance, to give us this sort of, you know, sweet fullness here, is, you know, that's why it's gathered on either side. So you still have the control in the middle that gives you the body, and then you know, this gathering coming out from there. So the thing is too, and when I realized, certainly doing it in half, sewing it in half scale, I really had to put in a stay stitch or a guide stitch along here. So 1 centimetre in full scale from the edge, you have to go down to find this point and then pivot here and then go up here. So you've actually already, like, you've done a stitch just through the single layer of fabric, so that you know where this corner is, so that when you put the gathering thread in here and fold this back here and gather it up, you know how far you have to sew down to stop, because this point here, like, it's no real guide, because even though this looks like it's only just 1 centimetre away in half scale, in full scale this is going to be 2 centimetres away, so you can't use that corner as a reference point. So even if you drew, you know, like drew on the fabric with chalk or something, you know, like a 1 centimetre seam allowance down this way, 1 centimetre seam allowance down this way, and it's, you know, that point is where you do the little stay stitch before you gather this to sew these together. But it might sound a little bit tricky, but, you know, once you've actually got it there in full scale, it should be easier for you to get your head around. And then, you know, once that's done, you know, this here gets sewn onto this gets sewn onto this, and you really sort of, all of the work is done, you know, in this area, and you end up with a sleeve that still just looks like, you know, the shape of the sleeve head is just a sleeve head. So then you sew this, you know, you sew the sleeve into the armhole without having to worry about any of this detail, because, you know, that part of the design, that part of the sewing has already been done. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could play with the proportions and things too, like maybe this, I've only done that, like, you know, 4 centimetres in full scale, but maybe if it was 8 centimetres, and, you know, you could really play with stuff. And you could also put net in there, or like gathered net or tulle or whatever, and, you know, make it big and foofy, and yeah. And it could even have, like, you've got the gathers going onto this panel here, but you could also gather this section too, maybe. So you've got gathers and then gathers and then gathers that way as well. So gives you some different options to play with. Yeah, so have a look in the library and have a look here at uni to see some old interesting things, that, because, you know, really if you did quite a plain dress and then, you know, or a shirt and did you know, put a lot of work into the sleeve, you know, you could really achieve something pretty fun and exciting and original.